Welcome back to the Work-Inspired Podcast, 𝗧vi broker with Rav Gerzi. And in our last podcast, we spoke about the important topic of making that transition from being in full-time learning or kollel into the workplace where one's spending most of the day working. And we said that in this podcast, we'd speak about an alternative, which is the ability to be able to spend most of one's day still learning, but at the same time being financially independent and working. And the truth is, I know this is a topic that Rebbe speaks about and Rebbe loves speaking about. In the Beis Medrash program, when we have the opportunity to be able, in the Chabura, to go through the topics of work and finance in depth and through the sugyas, something that we always focused on was who was the person who was giving over this teaching. You know, the historical aspect is a favorite aspect of mine, I know of Rebbe's as well. And we always noticed as we went through a Mishnah, we went through a Gemara, who is this Tana, and who is this Amora who is giving over this Mesorah that we have of the Torah outlook of finance and the Torah outlook at work. And something which was fascinating as we went through it, and we discussed it in the Chabura, which was, we seem to find that the Mesorah is coming down through, going back from Rabbi Shmuel, who was the grandson of the Kohen Gadol, right, from the Kohanim, down to Rabbi Meir, right, and then down to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, to the Nasiim. We have Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and then we have the teachings from Rav Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's son, right, and then traveling down to Rav, right, and then traveling down to Rav Huna, and traveling down to Rav Chisda. And it was an interesting pattern that we were reflecting on, that a lot of these Torahs and the hashkafa of work which is being shared is dafka coming from the Roshei Yeshiva, the Nasiim, or the 𝗀𝗘𝗧. It's an interesting thing. And one of the things that we were reflecting on was that when we look into the lives of these tzaddikim, right, who were the Roshei Yeshiva and which were the 𝗀𝗘𝗧, a lot of them, while they were doing that, also had businesses. It's an interesting paradigm that we find. If you're starting with Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, right, the Torah tells us Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was a successful businessman, a very, very successful businessman. He was also a Roshei Yeshiva. He was someone who was involved in business. Look at Rav. We're told that Rav had, at different stages of his life, he was involved in different things. He opened up a date brewery, right, and Rav had successful business ventures, and so much so that he was supporting, we're told, about 1,000 of his students. 1,000 of his students, he was personally financially supporting them in the yeshiva. And then we have Rav Huna, right, and then Rav Chisda, who ended up taking over the yeshiva from Rav. You know, if we look at the history of the yeshiva in Bavel, what took place, these were the Roshei Yeshiva, them too as well. Rav Huna and Rav Chisda were involved, I believe, in the wine business, right, perhaps both of them in the wine business or wine and beer business and the alcoholic industry. And it was something that when we were learning this together, it was like, wow, like this is a concept. There's this concept here of people that are 𝗀𝗘𝗧, people that are Roshei Yeshiva, at the same time that they're managing to have Parnassa by establishing businesses, which I'm assuming enable them to therefore be able to spend most of their time learning Torah because they were able to set things up and allow them to run while they didn't have to be involved in it as much.
This is something, I think we've shared this before, but I know in my family, my great-great-great-grandfather, Reb Shlomo Gerzi, he was the son, he is actually Rabbi Yitzchak Gerzi. 1 second, it's Rabbi Yitzchak had the factories, nachon? It was Rabbi Yitzchak Gerzi, so it's my grandfather's great-grandfather's name was Rabbi Yitzchak Gerzi. And he was one of several siblings. All of them were 𝗀𝗘𝗧 in their own right. Phenomenal Talmud Chacham. What do I mean by 𝗀𝗘𝗧? They mamash were leaders of their community. They were incredibly knowledgeable people. And they made Parnassa. The way they used to make Parnassa, they had a factory of wine and cheese. And because they were Mekubalim and Paiskim, Rosh Yeshivas, they were Rabbanim of Batei Midrashim, so they had a factory of wine and cheese, and they would all work. They would all spend time working, whether quarter of the day, and then there was a cycle where one sibling would spend the whole year learning, and then the other siblings would give a little bit to support.
Oh, wow.
So the 𝗀𝗘𝗧 for them was always Torah. And they wanted to do something that was fulfilling for them, so they used wine and cheese, had a factory of wine and cheese, and they could be mechazik the rabbim, and people bought from them because they were of a pure nature. And my grandfather proudly would say that you should know that you are from a chain of Rabbonim. I'm 48th generation, where they were Talmidei Chachamim, and they worked. And it's interesting because that's what seems to have been the Messiah. Whether you look at Rashi, the Rambam, Rabbeinu Tam, that it seems to be they were involved. Either they outsourced, but they had some sort of finance to give them that freedom in order to sit and learn. The 𝗀𝗀𝗃 for them, and the 𝗀𝗃, any Yehudi, any Jew, any frum Jew who holds themselves as frum, we have to be learning. We have to be learning. There's no ifs and buts. We have to be learning. Tanakh, Mishnah, Bavli, 𝗀𝗛𝗏, Midrashim. There's a lot to learn. We need to spend time in the Sfarim and b'dveikus, b'kedusha, and building ourselves, getting closer to 𝗀𝗃𝗧. This is something that's really important. And I know I can tell you as well, a lot of my Rabbonim, whether Rabbi Yosef Lieberman Shlita, one of the first nakudas that drew me to him, I read his 𝗀𝗪𝗧, then I found out he was an architect. He drew pictures. He drew pictures for buildings, draw plans, and I went to speak to him. Unbelievable. And wherever you look, the teachers that I had, tremendous amounts of the teachers I had, they had this balance where they had this independence and they were learning. They were 𝗧his and learning. There's a story that I heard from one of the Rabbonim in England. And when in the very early years, maybe 50s, 60s, they were starting to collect for koilelim. This new idea came into play that you'd sit and learn all day. And you'd be supported. You'd sit and learn all day. So one of the 𝗀𝗀𝗃 businessmen, there was a businessman, I heard this story, I think it was from Rav Moshe Sternbuch, if I remember correctly. And he was approached by somebody who's collecting from Eretz Yisrael. So this Yid came from Eretz Yisrael, and he came to, I think it was England, if I remember correctly, came to England, and he sat with this individual. And this individual who was a businessman, so he said, no, what are you collecting for? He says, a koilel. So he says, what is a koilel? So it's 3 sedarim in learning, and we collect money to help people stay in learning. Oh, okay, and how many hours are you learning? So he did the calculation, a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the evening, more than that, a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the afternoon, a few hours in the evening, and he did the mathematics. And the businessman, after hearing the amount of hours, says, that's what I learn in a normal day. That's why I get up at this time, I learn for a few hours, and then I have a lunch break, I learn for an hour or so, and then in the evening I learn for another few hours. And I heard this, and it was I found it very, very fascinating. And then having this Messiah in my personal family, I remember I had this idea in my head. I wanted to sit and learn. I wanted to spend most of my time learning. So I spoke to my father, and most of my friends in yeshiva, what happened, the usual, scheme of things was that you would go to yeshiva and you'd go to koilel for a little bit, and either you had, support to stay in learning, or which was full-time learning, or you would go out to work. So most of my friends now, most of them are, they went to university, they got a degree, doctors, lawyers, accountants, businessmen, whatever they're doing, but they're working and spending most of their time working, and they learn. They learn in the mornings and the evenings, whatever they can. I didn't want this. I wanted to try and spend my time in learning. I wanted to try and spend time in 𝗀𝗧his HaKodesh. That's what I wanted. And I spoke to my father who is very supportive of us, very, very supportive. You have a goal you want to try, we'll help you. Let's try to help you. So the 𝗪𝗪𝗧 that my father gave me, and this was in conjunction with speaking to my grandfather, my father's father, the 𝗪𝗪𝗧 was, try to find something that you can do that would free up your time to learn, but to make money. So I sat with our family Rebbe, the Biala Rebbe, and the Biala Rebbe suggested, knowing the family very well and knowing me since I was like 5 years old, he said to me, look at personal training, to do personal training, and look at sports physical therapy and nutrition and building was enough. And 𝗀𝗃𝗧, over a course of a year or so, I qualified in a number of different segments a number of different professions. I worked one at a time, so the health was one component that I really spent time on, and I put mamash everything I could into it. And as well, I started off by learning when I was learning in a yeshiva in London. I did building. I did a GMVQ. Now, it was a couple of days a week. It wasn't every day. It was a couple of days. So when I was in college, I was there in college. But when I was learning, I was learning. But that gave me, I worked, in the mornings and the evenings. And with my wife working, Baruch Hashem, I kept up my learning. But the goal, it was very interesting. My goal was sustainable learning. I wanted to be learning full-time, or I wanted to be learning hours and hours and hours a day. I wanted to be 𝗧𝗛𝗧 and 𝗦𝗨𝗕 Hashem hours and hours a day. And I wanted it to be sustainable. Because what I saw is that full-time learning for so many of my friends, again, I'm just speaking about my experience. I'm not speaking about other people's experience. I'm speaking about my experience. That I saw by so many of my friends, it wasn't sustainable. Once that funding ran out from parents or in-laws, it wasn't sustainable, and they had to go and then spend most of their time working,
right,
and less time learning. So that was my mahalach. That's what I personally did, and until today, Chazdei Hashem, every single day, I never take it for granted. Most of my day, I'm working, a few hours here and there, and most of my day, my wife's working hard as well. She supports the ideal of trying to stay in learning to the best of my ability. But most of my ideals have been maintained because I try to be smart in the perspective of finding a way to work and learn. But then, what happens is that I felt bad for my friends because ultimately they wanted to stay in learning and they couldn't stay in learning. And I'm hearing more and more stories, I have to go out to work. And there are people who they wanted to stay in learning and they could have stayed in learning. They've got good heads, good hearts, they're loyal, they've got 𝗟𝗃𝗧, good shalom bayis, they work on themselves. Why not? Why not? If a person wants to stay in learning, let them stay in learning. If a person wants to go out and work, let them go out to work. People have a right to fulfill their way of living the way they feel they need to do it, in a healthy manner, in a kasher and yasher manner. So this was part of the work inspired after speaking to Rabbi Singer and other Rabbonim, Biala Rebbe included. What I noticed is that there was a big gap between the people who are learning and then have to transition to work, and there was nothing really in the realm of those who wanted to stay in learning or those who wanted to set themselves up in work so they could carry on learning. So who's talking about that? And I really didn't find many people speaking about that. I don't reinvent the wheel. I don't like to work so hard. I don't so if somebody else is doing, I'll outsource. If somebody's doing a good job, collaboration. We live in a generation, our avodah in this story, collaboration, let's collaborate. So there's amazing education systems and courses that help people, move from full-time learning to working. But what about somebody who maybe wants to stay in learning and potentially could they stay? Let's just explore the question. Okay, there's what's out there. There's a lot of really, by bells there's a lot of good stuff out there that helps a person move. They transition from full-time learning to working. Amazing. But what about those people who want to stay in learning? Or what about those people who want to try and create a lifestyle where they could stay in learning as long as possible? Is that possible to model? Can we create something which is hopefully quite straightforward, cost-effective, and it could be modelled? Now, I did it as an individual. I did it. So let's look outside and let's see what's going on. So I went round, I spent a couple of years going round to different Rabbonim. They said it'll be amazing, but we don't know how to. I went to people who ran institutions that helped the transition between working and learning. They helped, they give some good ideas. But I realised, myself and speaking to other people, I have to gain wisdom in order to try and figure something out. And 𝗀𝗃𝗧 is that I would say that over the years I came up with a model, and the model takes effort, it takes time, it takes effort, but I would say 70 to 80% of the time it really has helped individuals who have wanted to stay in learning stay more full-time in learning than having to go out full-time to work.
Wow, it's interesting because, going back to when I was speaking about, about Rav and about Rav Huna, I mean, the model that we, seem to find, there was the ability to be able to do that. There was always a connection to business, which is, if a person's going to go out and he's going to become a doctor, a person's going to go out, and they had those back then also. They had doctors, they had builders, they had people that were working in the fields, people that were, chopping trees, people that were involved in work. So that's going to be their job. We find the Torah references the concept of an employee, a person's being paid an hourly wage, a day's wage, all over the place. And then, you have those that were involved in business. So whether they established their business based off of property, established their business, off of some type of a product, that's what enabled them to do it. And the question is, in today's, where do we stand today in terms of our ability to be able to do that? Is this something which is becoming, Rebbe's mentioning that, did the research, spoke with people, seeing a model that can work, is this something which is more accessible today than it was back then?
So I think, okay. So what I'm about to say, I want to make sure it's very, very clearly understood. It takes preparation, it takes effort, and you have to have mentorship and support. It's not something that happens overnight.
It's not a quick fix.
It's not a quick fix. But I didn't want the quick fix. I wanted to build myself in a way to maintain a lifestyle. So I believe, and again, it's what you're prepared to do. So with love and respect to anybody who's listening and to us in here, it's what you're prepared to do, which is very important. So the way that I found a way to help people. So, lemashal, one way, and I'm not going to go into it now, I'll just touch 𝗀𝗀 𝗀𝗃, was, for example, learning trading. Not for everybody. It's not for everybody, but for example, there are several people that we have helped over the years that had a knack for mathematics and they had the 𝗬𝗏 and they've done trading. We found trading courses and they learned trading. And 3 people I know today, 3 people, one of them's a family member, 3 people today, we paid for their course to learn some elements of trading, and they did the course and they started. Today they learn 3/4 of a day and they trade in the evening. Their wife works as well. They don't make a tremendous amount of money, but through investments, and now they've been working at it for so many years, they help other people.
Right.
So they're learning 3/4 of a day. And there's a couple of people. Now, for example, online, the online world, the world of the internet, the online world is unbelievable. And if a person, again, this is the mahalach that we've helped people with, that if somebody can learn basic mahalchim, setting up a website, learning basic elements of advertising, so, they can go very, very far using online services. And today, more than that, for example, one person we know, he has something called Shopify. He uses a platform called Shopify. He goes in and he did his research and he's selling, buying and selling. So for example, online, there's a number of things you can do. Online you can do, for example, teaching and training. There's teaching and training. You can teach, say for example, you have something that you can teach over, you can teach, and online. So, lemashal, there's somebody who teaches guitar. He's got students in America, in London, and that's half of his income. He works a few hours at night. Yeah, there's another person, for example, they set up a whole, platform online. Again, online using Zoom. He works a few hours in the evening. He works with therapy. And he works online, and it's America and England, and he's here in Eretz Yisrael most of his day learning. You've got, for example, digital courses. Person can have, I've got my list here, I'm going to bring it closer actually. Digital courses and membership. So again, it takes effort, you need to study. But say, for example, somebody has a mahalach in therapy. They can nicely, neatly record video and maybe a book, and you could build up a membership to sell that. The guitar, there's somebody, for example, who actually did this. He has a course in training. So he sells it $10, $15, whatever it may be, and he has membership. Okay.
Right, being able to set up a way to have a digital product.
Correct.
Product.
Selling, you've as well got selling a service. You've got selling a service, or you've got coaching. Right now I'm working with 3 people. There's an individual in America who started up a whole coaching course. And there's a few people who have right now, we know this gentleman, and then there's 2 ladies, one in America, one in 𝗟𝗃 Yisrael, and they've created digital courses. And 𝗀𝗃, they're helping people. They've got their little niche of people. There's a membership. They're training people, and the names are getting out there. Say, for example, affiliate marketing. It's another way, affiliate marketing. If you don't have something you can sell somebody else's course and get a cut. Again, I'm not saying it's a quick, it takes time. I'll tell you a story. There was a year, this was the first time I ever did this. There was somebody in London who wanted to stay in learning. And we tried to come up with ideas. They saw that I was doing it. Somebody, Reb Chuna Halpern, put them in touch with me. This guy is good mind, and his wife, mamash, on board, and together they started up the following. Really, you could still do it today, a bit more difficult, but you could still do it today. What they did is as following. They went to, in Stanmore, in London, in England, the area where we lived, there was a training school for horses. Training school, people would learn to ride horses. So they had this idea because one of their kids was in a young kid, 4 or 5 years old. They were going to do therapy there. So they said, it'd be nice to get a book on how to ride horses. So they looked up online and they found a book. Somebody lived in England, a book on how to ride horses for children. And they bought 20 of them. They sold them like that. They said, that's interesting. So then bought another 20. Bang! They added a little bit more on. They said, we're selling these books. And lo and behold, within a couple of months, they found themselves in a business where they were looking out at what people needed just in the community. They'll find it online. They did the legwork. They brought it in and they sold. Then what happened is that this grew, and the person now learns pretty much all day, and he works a couple of hours. His wife is spending most of the time working on the business. But then, for example, they found shops that were going under, and they would buy the schayra from the shops. They would buy the produce, the items of the shops. What's the word I'm looking for?
Products.
They'll buy the products of the shop, and then they'll sell it. They'll buy it for £5,000, £6,000, and then they'll make a profit, £20,000, £30,000.
Right.
And it wouldn't be so crazy because they set it up. They had people to speak to. They had an audience, and it's something that took time to build. Again, this is not a quick fix. It took time to build.
Right.
You've as well got, for example, buying and selling businesses. There's more. I've got another list, but that buying and selling businesses that online. This is something else that we helped somebody in, a couple of people in the Ramat Bet Shemesh area, in Yerushalayim, and somebody up north, where they found an online business. There's websites that buy and sell businesses. They bought an online business that sold a certain product, and everything is online. Everything is digital. And they built up the business. They bought the business for $50. They sold their first business for about $300. And then they bought another business, and they are making $1,500 to $2,000 a month. And this is a few hours working in the evening.
Wow.
It's real. It is real. It takes time. It takes dedication, but there is a way. If you educate yourself and you want to do it, there's a way that you can stay long term if one would want. There's a way that one can do it.
I keep on hearing Rebbe's warnings, and I think it's so important because I think a lot of the skepticism around this topic, especially, sometimes you're in certain platforms and see advertisements, like almost every advertisement, or maybe it's just me who gets them, but it's almost every advertisement, some guy basically telling you how you can just sign up for this course and this, this boot camp and this course, and, within 6 months you're going to be making lots of money. I think that there is a skepticism because it's like, wait, you're telling me that that's just going to work. But I think with the introduction that what Rebbe shared, and it's so important for us to recognize, is that, when it comes to Parnassa, as we know, especially over here in Work Inspired, right, everything's from 𝗀𝗃. We have to do our 𝗪𝗪, and it's going to require effort. It's going to require work. It's not going to be simple, but what we're hearing here, and this is something that I love, is that there's a mindset of trying to look at things differently. Yes. And it's not really new, meaning it happened back in the times of the Gemara, it happened at the times of the Roshei and the 𝗟𝗃, but because of the times that we're living in, because of technology, because of the internet, the world can be at one's fingertips. So a person could be living in country A, and be able to sell to country Z, just like that. And if a person understands and they invest, Amazon, is definitely a very big buzzword today. Everyone's speaking about it, and there's that similar skepticism of, everyone's trying to do it. Does it work? Doesn't it work? But I think what's beautiful about what we just shared here, and I understand maybe that this is just a Roshei Tevos of each one of these, it really could be its own course of what needs to happen and understanding it, is that there could be something for anyone. And so as a career coach who works with different people, I understand this, and I share this with people, and people appreciating hearing it, is that Hashem didn't create us all the same. So it's nice for someone to just be like, you can just become a programmer and you'll make good money, you can just go into sales and make good money, you should just go do it. That doesn't work, because Hashem made each one of us different. We have different personalities, we have different skills, we have different talents. But what we're hearing from this list, and that's what is that there are different pathways for different types of people.
Correct.
For some people it might be more of a sales. For some people, they're not going to be that person on the phone. They're not going to be having the Zoom meetings. But because of things that can be done with affiliate marketing, things that can be done behind the scenes, things that could be set up, right? Things that could be designed with automation, right? Automation, and where things are headed with automation today, we're looking at a reality in which this can become more tangible for each and every person to have this reality of being able to learn most of one's day and setting oneself up in a way for Parnassa, so that a person could bring in the income that they need. Which I guess leads me to the next question, is that if this is something which has been done and something that can be done, and if a person goes down this route, for those who are listening in, right, if I go down this route, I can open up my day to being able to learn 6, 7, 8 hours, and just work, like we've heard, a couple of hours a day. Is that something which we all should be doing? Maybe perhaps you can even say it's bittul Torah not to.
Very important question. Very important.
Why should? Who says you can go and work for 6, 7, 8 hours a day when you can do this?
I would suggest again, lovingly and respectfully, everybody has their avodah, everybody has their tafkid, and the nakuda is, it's not everyone's job. Not everybody, what I've noticed, again, just doing this over the last 20 years, what I've noticed, not everybody can do this. I believe that with the right mentorship, with the right support and training, and with the right action, lots of action, there's a number of people who can do it, but it's not everyone's job to do it. Some people, they've done their time learning, they were 𝗀𝗍𝗪 in avodas hakodesh, and now their tafkid is to megale elokus in a different sort of way.
Right, like we said last time.
We said, you mentioned 𝗀𝗃 ben Akane, Doug Wells, and you have Hillel, Shammai, you have all these different tzaddikim. They were 𝗀𝗪𝗧, Sandlar, they were 𝗀𝗧. But the nakuda which is really important is that it's not that we are just serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's important to share that we are the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are the gilui. What I do is the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The me that's here in this incarnation, the you that's here in this incarnation, has never been around before. The you that's here now has never ever been around before. You are the gilui or. You are it. So we have to recognize that whatever we do, b'kavana, even without kavana, but even more special with kavana, you are sharing, you are expressing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. And every single person is different. So if a person is a plumber, they are 𝗀𝗧 in plumbing, in a kedusha, as the Biala Rebbe Sam would say, a kasha and yasha way. If a person is an electrician, if a person is a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, whatever it may be, psychologist, when you are being you and you're doing what you're doing b'kavana, and with the proper 𝗀𝗪𝗧 you're being on, that is gilui or. And people are different. People are different. So whatever you do, be 100,000% engaged. Whatever you do, find ways, 𝗧his, find ways to be emotionally involved in a healthy way with what you're doing. Very, 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 very important. So again, what I discussed today, what we have discussed, it's a much bigger conversation. There are a lot of people who just don't know about what we've discussed. So we're just giving options. We're sharing, hopefully, wisdom. You have to figure out as the listener, we have to figure out what's right for me, but always to know that you, through knowing yourself, you, through proper guidance, you, with proper support, have to figure out what is the healthiest way for you to express your neshama in the world through what you do, through how you do it in mamash, a real engaged way.
Well, okay, thank you for answering that question. I think that really ties these two podcasts that we've given together, and that's why we wanted to really speak about this topic in part 1 and part 2, to recognize, especially a message here that we're talking about all the time, in the Pilzno-based Medrash and work inspired, is that, when it comes to Parnassa, when it comes to work, it's one pathway. It's the pathway of 𝗀𝗪𝗪. And that's really what Hashem designed for us, and each one of us has the ability to do it. And it all starts with that mentorship. It all starts with that self-awareness. And what we see is that there have always been two ways of going. There's been more than two ways. There have always been people who've just been in learning. But when it comes to Parnassa, we've had tzaddikim that have been involved in regular jobs, and then we've had tzaddikim that have been involved and set up in this way of setting up businesses which enable them to be able to learn more. And what we wanted to do here today, as Rebbe said so beautifully, is just for us as a walkaway to ask that question. And that's really what we challenge each one of you who are listening to ask that question. Is this something that I've thought about in the past? Is there a skill, is there a talent that I have that perhaps I can be creating a service? There's something that I can create a digital product. There's some way that I can be automating something that I do, right? Or I can use a skill that I have to set something up so that even if it's not going to be right now or in the next 6 months or in the next 12 months, like we said, as Rebbe said, it takes time. But looking forward at your trajectory in life, where you want to see yourself, your family is going to be growing, you want to be able to free up more time so that you can be there for them, that you're able to dedicate your times towards Torah. Is there something that each one of us can do to try to be able to take one step, find a person to speak to, and then B'ezras Hashem see what's there for us, and whatever it's going to be, to recognize the combination of these past two podcasts. It's just a pathway of 𝗀𝗪𝗪. Hashem should bless each one of us,
Amen.
Ourselves, that we should understand and find that calling that Hashem has for us in this area of Parnassa, and to be able to approach it with excitement, right, with engagement, and with 𝗀𝗪𝗪 and with joy.
𝗀𝗪𝗪 Hashem 𝗀𝗪𝗪𝗀.
Amen.